Hey, so I know it's the last day. It's after lunch, so you guys are probably quite tired. I did a bit of research on monitoring. It was completely boring, so I threw it all away, and I've done my own version, which is based around my whimsical journey as I've gone through my career, what's happened in the background by accident, and how monitoring sort of played a part in that. So about me, I'm the CTO, co-founder of Dataloop. We're a monitoring company. We're only about 2 years old. I spend most of my time at the moment traveling around the world talking about Erlang and our time series database. So we produce a free and open source time series database called DalmatinaDB. I spend a lot of time writing blog stuff about it as well. I get in a bit of trouble. It's the highest praise you can get really when you write a blog. And this is completely opinionated, it's all biased, but it's worth reading anyway. So I do a few of those, mostly related to benchmarking. There's quite a lot of, in the open source community, there's quite a lot of special snowflakes that create their own software and get really offended when you try it and aren't too happy with it. So I wanted to begin the story somewhere and have some sort of overall arc to this thing. I looked at the timeline of computing in general, and it doesn't go back very far. It only goes back to 1950 or so. And when you look at it, like that completely is boring. From there to there. So we're just going to cut that off. We're just going to pretend it never happened. Mainframes, obviously, were built by big companies, put together. I bought a mainframe once. It was quite cool. It seemed like lots of spare parts put together. They couldn't sell, bolted, strapped together with special software that made it all work. But you can't really play with it very much. You normally get 4 different types of engineer turn up with a mainframe. One that will do the network, one that will do the storage, one that will do various bits and pieces. And then after that, what came was a series of smaller things, but again, pretty much self-enclosed. And really, it wasn't until the internet kind of came about that things really got more interesting for me. Before that, it was fairly boring. So I'm going to start the story at 1999, which is when the world began. So my first job, I actually I came out of school. My mum kept saying, go to university, go to university. It's like, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to get a job, get some money, have some fun. So I went to the job centre and tried to get a job as a van driver because I thought having a van and some money would be really cool at the time. Not very clever 19-year-old. But I came out of the job centre with a job working for a software company. I didn't know it was a startup at the time. It was sort of a 40 or 50 person startup in Watford, and they were just building software. So when I joined, they had like the usual broom closet full of servers. It looked similar to that. That wasn't I should have taken a picture of my one, but it was literally in a cupboard, and it was racked like that. And what they were doing was they were turning what the developers had written upstairs. They were building it every night. They were, at some point, writing it to a CD, and if you were lucky, the CD worked after extensive testing. Some salesman would have sold it to some poor company, and it would probably sit on a shelf somewhere as a toaster or a coaster. So there was a lot of shelfware going on. But that seemed to work quite well in those days. I mean, you could get away with building software, testing it a bit, and then the salesman would paint this wonderful picture of what it would actually do. And then by the time you'd given them the CD, it was 6 months later and you're on to the next deal, which seemed like a great way to do things. And I mean, obviously, that wasn't a great setup in the first place. We didn't have much monitoring on that. So my monitoring was that, basically. Somebody would notice something went wrong. They'd call me up and start shouting. And I'd generally log on to fix it, which is kind of fun. But I found out that the reason that I needed monitoring to start with was that I kind of like to play around. I mean, I was in IT. I was in the basement, as you normally get put in the basement. I had a big desk, and my desk was full up with various bits of computing stuff I'd bought off eBay. Half the computer stuff was sprawled over the place, and I had water cooling systems, and I had all kinds of weird and wonderful things. I had like a £600 graphics card that I never used on there, which is quite cool. And what I really liked to do was play around with this stuff and not get distracted. I didn't want to be like halfway through playing and then, something's broken. So I like to come in the morning, find out what was broken, use my hour to fix it all, and then spend the rest of the day playing, or learning new things, or setting up new stuff, or creating new stuff to monitor. So what I really wanted to do was like my favorite program, defrag, where I could sort of take all of the world's problems and get them, and then I could have like a big contiguous play area to play in for the rest of the day. So that was kind of what monitoring did for me. I wanted to get ahead of the problems. I wanted to come in and see a big screen of green or red, and for the red stuff, start attacking the red, get it all green again, and then I'd know that I'd be safe to do whatever I wanted until it all started to turn red again. So this was, well, back in 1999. There weren't that many pieces of software available. I think Nagios had only been out for about 4 or 5 years, but I wasn't really searching for monitoring, so I didn't I didn't necessarily know about that stuff. So we looked around. I bought a copy of WhatsApp Gold. It was fairly rubbish software, but I thought it was cool at the time. And it gave you these. It was a central box. You ran it on Windows, and you could configure it with lots of different Windows servers, and it would just literally just ping them with ICMP, see if they're up or down, and it would use WMI just to pull back the disk stats. And to be honest, if the box was up and its disk wasn't full, generally it worked. So just that brief bit of monitoring allowed me to sit back and have a cool time most of the time anyway. So my life got a lot easier at that point. With that spare time, I did that sort of stuff. I had so much spare time. I was able to, move from the closet into I got given an office at one point. It wasn't a proper computer room. I moved in stages. As I got evicted from one room, I kind of made a mess in another room. So I got my own special office, put some racks in it, started joining stuff together. The company was growing despite what I was doing, earning earning more money. Obviously, the salesmen were good. And yeah, we had all that sort of stuff. I used that spare time to kind of get up to speed on certificates. I pushed my mum away and said, look, if I keep doing like MCSE and CCNA and SCSA and my Red Hat certification, can I avoid university for a bit longer? And she managed to leave me alone for a bit. So yeah, I was setting up that stuff, learning loads of cool stuff. And then 2004 came along, and things started to get more serious at work. So obviously, the company was getting bigger. They came along and they said, right, we need to. One of the salesmen sold our software on the mainframe, so we need to get a mainframe. Oh, and they've also sold it on 18 different flavors of Unix. So you need to buy an HPUX, an AIX, all these different flavors of things. So I had quite a good time. I just bought them. They turned up, and I had no idea how to set them up. It's quite that was the overconfidence kicking in. I learned how to use a serial cable fairly quickly, but the reality was I just employed consultants. So I sat with consultants for a few years and just set up all these systems. It's quite good fun. But yeah, I ended up with lots of these boxes. I think we ended up with a proper computer room after I'd overheated the office. I got a proper raised floor computer room, and yeah, it was pretty good. But my WhatsApp Gold thing wasn't scaling very well. I had more than just Windows boxes, and I needed something a bit better, something that did a bit more stuff. So at the time, I looked at Nagios, and it still isn't very nice even now. It wasn't particularly friendly. I wanted auto discovery and all this other cool stuff. So at the time that a new product came out, I think we were on the beta of Groundwork open source, which was like a front end on top of Nagios. You used to do some cool stuff. You used to have like events and dashboards. But the really cool bit was that this thing would take Nagios check scripts. So I don't know, do you guys know what Nagios check scripts are? Raise your, you do? Okay, cool. Yeah, they're probably the best piece of technology ever. You can write them in any language, and the only rules are they've got to exit with an exit code of 0, 1, 2, or 3. 0 is okay, 1's a warning, 2's a critical, 3's an unknown. And then you can just write some standard out text, and anything after the pipe gets graphed. I still use them today, they're pretty cool. And the great thing is, for lazy people like me, you can just go onto the exchange and other people have written them. The annoying thing is they never work. Like, you always copy them down. And also the other annoying thing is sometimes I've written them in Perl or PHP. So I spend half my time taking them and just putting them into Python, resubmitting them back again, which people don't normally like. So there I am. I'm spending like 4 years making a massive mess, implementing lots of platforms, building a big computer room, setting up proper monitoring. I've gravitated from the WhatsApp Gold, which is kind of like the toy monitoring tool, up to the big boy Nagios tool, which was quite good fun. I don't know what happened, but somehow I was now in charge of IT, right? And we'd been acquired by a multi-billion-dollar company called Pitney Bowes. I was looking after 18 data centers at this point. We had like 30 people. don't know how that happened. But I think the reason was because I was the one that set up all of the complex systems, like the Unixes and the mainframes. And anybody else that came in that wanted to look after it was like, not touching that, going nowhere near it. So yeah, I ended up looking after most of it. I had a team that used to do what we call legacy, like Unix and mainframe. A team that used to do VMware, because we had this big internal cloud. And then I created another team, because I kind of got bored of all that stuff. I get bored a lot. And we went off and did DevOps-y type stuff. So yeah, I had a really cool computer room. I had a chair like that as well. You could swing around. And it gets quite cold in a computer room, so you need to move around a bit. And out of one of the acquisitions, we inherited a Zabbix. So Zabbix is really good. It's like a Nagios, but it's got a SQL backend. The only problem with Zabbix is its users. It's like a big church of Zabbix. If you say anything bad about Zabbix to anybody, they'll come down on you like it's pretty bad. But I liked it anyway, until I met the users. So yeah, we had it. And the cool bit that it did was, because you had this SQL backend, you could do a lot more in the UI. You could create cool dashboards. It would do auto-discovery. It was kind of like a better groundwork at the time. And I think the analytics were slightly better. I mean, they're a bit dated by today's standards, but you can kind of see like lines and numbers and colors, in fact. And the great thing was, because we were now 18 data centers, you couldn't just have one box, and then if you wanted to look at another data center, you'd log on to another box. Flipping between 18 different monitoring tools in 18 different browser tabs, it soon gets old. So what you really want is to sort of have a big monitoring tool that scales up. And Zabbix does that. So you can put proxies in each of your different locations, and you can kind of merge them all together and put the agents to connect to different boxes so you don't overload stuff. So that's kind of where we got to. And then 2010 came along. We were still growing, not sure how. And I think we're up to like $1 billion of software division within Pitney Bowes, which is quite cool. And somebody had the bright idea that we were never, ever going to release any new software that wasn't SaaS. So I thought it was quite cool. I was kind of bored of writing those CDs and give them to customers, and perhaps they'd install them. SaaS seems to it's like the coalface of IT. It needs to be good, otherwise people will just leave and choose a different SaaS product. That's what I thought anyway. So obviously, first thing I did was I bought a book. Have you guys seen this one? Yeah, it's really old now, isn't it? But that was cool back then. And then after I'd read the book, I thought, no, I'm not doing this. So I brought in ThoughtWorks as some consultants for a year. there's a bit of a trend of this. They came in, and that was quite a good year. I learned a lot of sort of new stuff. So I was busy plugging serial cables into things, putting disks in, setting up networks, and generally making a mess in the computer room, and also setting up monitoring tools to monitor the mess and helping developers create software. And they came along and they introduced me to things like Puppet, and that was quite cool at the time. I hadn't really seen Puppet. I was living a sheltered existence. I think Puppet was only 3 years old at this time anyway, so I hadn't really missed too much. And yeah, they kind of came in, they said, look, you need to be doing infrastructure as code. Everything that you do needs to be reproducible. It's news for me. So we started to do it. We were writing lots of Fabric scripts to kind of kick off VMware builds of different systems automatically. We were PXE booting stuff off of a cobbler to build the Linux images, lots of TeamCity stuff to drive that thing. And we were using, at the time, I think there was a good Puppet module for Nagios. So when you spun up a box, it would kind of, it wasn't as good as it is now. Nowadays, it's awesome and amazing. I think back then it was a little bit, we'll put the NRP agent on the box and we'll drop a few scripts on. Nowadays, I think the module, you can kind of define, this is my service, and then magically everything sort of monitors. It wasn't as good back then. But that was what we used, and yeah, it was generally good. Over the 2-year period, so I spent a year kind of training myself up, learned programming and worked with ThoughtWorks. I think we targeted about 6 different projects where we set up automated monitoring throughout Pitney Bowes. And those were generally sort of successful. So successful, I left. I got bored. So I joined Alfresco, which is a document management company. They do open source stuff. I was looking for a company that was headquartered in the UK. I didn't want to join another US company and have to keep traveling. And there aren't many. And this was cool. So I joined there, and then they immediately kind of flipped their headquarters to the US. which which wasn't very cool. But yeah, they had this open source piece of software, a big Java app, monolithic thing, that you could, a developer would sort of download, and then they'd start building their app around it, and then ultimately you would implement it internally. It would be their document system. We wanted to take that, split it up, and make it into a cloud service, something like Box nowadays, although obviously wasn't that successful. And to do that, again, stuck with the monitoring, although this time, clearly I had grander plans. We set up all the red stuff to monitor the blue stuff. So this was a few years ago now. So, I mean, when we first started cutting up the system, we just did it into sort of like an SOA type thing. And it was kind of like going from a really big system. And I think by the time I'd left, it was like 20 different alt services, and they were still sort of being split out. But I remember at the time we'd set up, Google Analytics was the first. I was there before I even sort of got in there. The marketing people loved that. And we had Mixpanel as well. They'd managed to convince the developers to put some Mixpanel tracking into the application so that you could see when somebody had sort of uploaded a document, what sort of document it was. It was a PDF and stuff like that. But I didn't really like those interfaces, so I stuck Gecko board on top so that we could get a decent dashboard. And then there was this cool thing called Go Squared, which would basically let you spy on your users and see where they'd come from and click through to their Facebook pages and stuff. It's quite good. I think they blocked all that now with the cookies, so but it's good back then. And then we brought App Dynamics in because it was a big Java app, and it was kind of like a black box, so we needed to get some visibility into it. We had New Relic to start with, but I could never convince any of the developers to actually log in. And App Dynamics was more useful to the operations people to kind of produce reports, to put in tickets, to get them to do stuff. We spent we wasted about a year and a half on Elasticsearch. That was setting up the ELK stack. Back then, it wasn't as mature as it is now. But yeah, for the amount of value that we got out of it, it was insane. We've set it up again recently at a few places, and it's much better now. You're not having to do crazy stuff like put Redis in front of it and put Kafka in front of Redis and try to scale all the different pieces. And I kind of got bored of the whole Nagios thing, so we put OpsView in. This was like a few years ago. And that gave you a nice front end, again, on top of Nagios. And then we started to put in all of the other stuff that you typically see nowadays, like Graphite and StatsD and other stuff, and try and get the custom instrumentation. And we hit against, I think, a problem that most SaaS companies hit, and I've seen this a fair bit, which is when you go from creating a product or something that you sell, it's a lot different to providing a service. When you're providing a service, you're not just selling features, you're selling whether it works properly or how fast it is and all that sort of stuff. So at Alfresco, they obviously had this mindset of being given a list of tasks by product management, completing the tasks, getting a big pat on the back, well done guys. But unfortunately in the SaaS world, you're not kind of finished until it's online and people are happy with it and you're constantly iterating it. So there was a lot of work to be done there. And you can't just go in there and tell people to change. That's very difficult. So what we had to do was we wanted to kind of use some of this monitoring data to try and change some behaviors. So, before I was using monitoring to make my life easier, to get that contiguous free space. Now I'm trying to use monitoring data to try to influence what people are working on. That was the kind of the goal. Instead of having the product manager prioritizing a big list of features, we would try and get up the operational issues into that bunch as well. So what we did with that was we wrote a load of sort of quite brittle Ruby scripts that would go off to Graphite and off to different places and pull back things. So we worked out that the management meeting was on a Monday morning, and that we wanted to get a report sent to the management team on a Monday morning telling them the exact state of production, everything that we kind of knew about it. So we wrote these Ruby scripts, and what they'd do is they generated a table. They'd go off to Amazon, and they'd work out our monthly bill. They'd go off to our own system and work out how many users we had. And so you'd get a table of number of users on the system, cost per user, cost per free user, cost per premium user, and then little up and down green or red arrows to see if we were getting better or worse. Below that big table of kind of what everybody had been doing in the app, like the businessy type metrics, we'd have performance metrics. So we would embed Graphite PNGs into it with big red lines across. So we'd work with development and we'd say, right, what's an adequate login time? Is 5 seconds between me hitting login and me actually getting in, is that embarrassing? And they go, yeah, it is. All right, we'll put the line at 10 seconds then. And then, of course, it constantly went above 10 seconds. So we were putting these sort of lots of blocks of performance data in, with agreeable, really high thresholds. And what was generally happening when we told developers these issues would be they'd try and log in. That's quick. And then they'd just carry on back to their work. But when you can actually see proper customers doing it and you know that it's constantly slow, you get a bit more action. So we created this kind of reporting system around all of our monitoring tools. And I think within like a week or two, we had prioritized all of the features that would help the service get better. We slowed down feature development, but the usage of the service was a lot better. You could log in, you could search for different terms, and it'd be quick. I mean, we uncovered loads of issues around searching for different words in the system, and some of them would time out after 60 seconds. And more importantly, I had a dashboard like Starship Enterprise. I had loads of screens up everywhere. We'd spent loads of money on this stuff. I had like little mapping of Java things and lines, status indicators and stuff. I mean, it was all quite useful. But I remember the CEO used to walk past my desk and say, "Stephen, what have you bought now? What's this new thing, and what does it do?" But yeah, I think there wasn't at the time any sort of unified monitoring thing that would give you it all, and so you needed a few different tools that would tell you stuff. App Dynamics was great for looking inside the Java apps, still is, I think, and having the log data was really great for forensics. One of the best things that we did get out of Elk was we gave it to customer support, so they could tell when a user was lying. Like a user would call up and say, "It's not working, I can't log in." And they're going, "Well, have you typed in the right password?" "Yes." "But I can see the log, you're not. It says wrong password." And then you'd have a conversation about resetting the password and stuff, rather than the usual, let's raise a ticket with IT, there must be the network or something that's broken, which never was. So yeah, I mean, it went pretty well. They made the SaaS app more of an add-on to the enterprise thing. I wanted to go big and do the box thing, but in the end, they kind of pivoted a bit, so I left. And after doing like 6 different projects with SaaS companies, after launching a SaaS product for somebody else, I thought, why not quit and just do my own? So we decided to do a startup. One of the ideas behind it was that, in the old days, you had sort of the monitoring tools that were more static, that were designed for the old ways of doing things, where you would wrap them in configuration management, and it kind of worked, but it was a bit clunky. Spend a lot of time sort of working out how to register, deregister, how you would get them to dynamically change your configuration and stuff. And then there were more SaaS companies coming out at the time. I mean, back when we started this about 3 years ago now, Datadog was kind of there, but I mean, Sysdig and SignalFX didn't exist. And it's really only been the last couple of years that people have kind of looked at their monitoring and said, well, we're moving a lot of our stuff to the cloud anyway. We should probably look at SaaS monitoring solutions. We wanted to kind of go one step further. So again, making life easier for me. Wouldn't it be nice if I didn't actually have to set up the monitoring? Wouldn't it be nice if I could go off and play with other things and I could produce a platform where you could provide it to other people and they could do their own work. You could devolve it down, that was kind of the plan for this. So we were going to try and make a better Nagios, Graphite, StatsD, all in one big box, and make it so that it would work with config management and you could do all the stuff you wanted to do in operations, so it worked for me programmatically. But also you had a nice interface on top where you could devolve it down to the different teams running their services. So microservices are a reasonably new thing, more of an operational sort of people thing rather than a technical thing. But I work with a lot of companies nowadays and they're all kind of splitting up into teams of people. I think the rule is if you buy 2 large pizzas and there's not enough, it's too big. So it's kind of like these tiny little teams that all have an operational focus on their bit of the product, like a payment system or some sort of search platform. So we did that, and obviously created new dashboards, things that are easy to use, decent alert rules. There we go. Obviously, so that people can set their own on-call rotas. But we've gone a bit further than that now. So just having the ability to create these cool dashboards that goes on TV screens and create your alert rules, it's kind of cool, but what you're getting nowadays is you're getting lots of data from your operating system, from your services, from your code, like your custom metrics. And you need to do some quite complicated analytics on it now, to try and work stuff out. We've got certain queries that will tell us, how many website visitors we had. So you've got to do a query for that. You might want to divide it by the number of clicks, so you get like a click-through ratio. Even simple things within services, you tend to need dimensional data. I used to do, well, I did A-level maths, and I remember doing calculus and working out the derivative of something. I thought, I'll learn this, but I'll never need it again. And unfortunately, now I do. I have to use these maths things. And they're even talking about adding like sine, cosine, tan, and other. I don't even know how that works. But you need to know those types of functions nowadays to get the types of answers that you want from systems. So we have a system that obviously is quite open. I mean, we take open source data in, Nagios, Graphite, StatsD, Prometheus data. We aggregate it all together, and then you can get it back out again if you want to via pretty much any open source dashboarding system like Grafana. So what we see nowadays, typically when I go in, and this is kind of what I wanted at Alfresco when I first walked in. I'm fairly lazy. I just want to buy a few tools and then move on with my life. So I'd like to go off and buy some sort of hosted log solution, something like a Splunk. The only problem is it's massively expensive, and everyone just sets up, I'd probably do the same. If I had the money, I'd buy Splunk. And then you want to go and buy some sort of APM, like AppDynamics or New Relic. And then there was this big mess of open source that I've created 10 times now, over and over. Kind of gets boring. I just wanted to buy that. So we kind of created that. So yeah, that's a typical monitoring project for us. We go in, actually, a typical place we go in has got about 20 or 30 different monitoring tools, and we try and get them down to 4 or 5, with us displacing quite a few of them. So, summary. I think things have got complex. They're far more complex than my little broom closet when I started, just plugging stuff in. I don't think you can get away with just knowing what's up and down anymore. I think you probably could back in the old days when you were selling CDs of software, but you can't nowadays. You want to get ahead of the issue, not just to get that contiguous free time, but because you don't get many chances with users online, especially with SaaS businesses. They'll try it a few times. If it doesn't work, they'll just move, and then you end up with no money. You do need to get all of your metrics into one place, ideally. However you do that, and then start to build more complex analytics on top of it. And there isn't a unified monitoring app at the moment. Everyone's kind of going in that direction. Everyone advertises it, but marketing and monitoring is dreadful. Everybody's got the same message, and they all do slightly different things. And yeah, I think some people think of monitoring as something that you set up and then you walk away from. That's not it. For me, my entire career has always been 50% of my time deploying new stuff, and then 50% of it measuring what I've deployed. And that seems to be DevOps, the continuous cycle. You need to set up new stuff, release new value to customers, but you need to make sure it's working. That's it. Any questions? I don't know how I'm doing. I never actually practiced this. 27 minutes. Cool.